So, hello, welcome to Lug, the channel where two mates talk about watches. I'm Oli,
I'm Ben.
and today we're going to be doing a video on the Tudor Black Bay GMT. Before we get into that, let's do a quick wrist check. So, what are you wearing, Ben?
Wearing the Oris Divers 65.
As featured in our previous video.
Yeah.
So make sure to check that one out.
Yeah, it's getting plenty of wrist time at the moment. Very much enjoying it. So. What about you, Ollie?
Well, I'm wearing the Tudor Black Bay GMT because we're going to be talking about it. So I thought it probably made sense to wear it. And here she is.
Very nice.
Actually,
very nice.
currently one of the longer serving watches in my collection. But yeah, we'll be talking about her today.
Into the main body of the video, Ollie, if you just run through the specs for me.
Sure. So it's a 41mm diameter case with a lug to lug of around 50mm. You've then got a thickness of 15mm, and at the lugs the bracelet is 22mm, and it then tapers down to 18mm at the clasp, so it's got a nice taper to it. And then one of the most exciting things about the watch is the movement, and this is the Tudor in-house MT5652 movement, which has 70 hours of power reserve and is COSC certified, which should bring you accuracy of -4 to +6 seconds per day. And then like the rest of the Black Bay range, it has a great water resistance, so 200 meters, so it is very much a proper dive watch. And all of this can be yours for just over £3,000. So 3,040 is the current RRP for this watch, but I'm sure you can get a little bit knocked off that if you're nice to your local AD.
Were there other watches you were considering? Was this a watch that was at the top of your list initially?
Yes, so to be honest, Tudor as a brand had been at the top of my list for quite a long time, and I think it's probably a brand that is on a lot of people's lists to try.
It's also a brand where if you've dipped your feet into Oris, Longines, it's one of those brands where you naturally then I think look towards being the next step into luxury brands. I think
that's true. That's true. I think it's probably a step up from a Oris Longines, and then it's getting into that Omega territory almost now with some of the more in-house models.
So. Yeah.
But I still think Omega is slightly level above when you look at some of the materials used. But Tudor was on the list. I had just sold another watch, which we might talk about another time.
Definitely.
I went into Watches of Switzerland one day, and I probably tried on, no exaggeration, about 15 different watches.
The sales assistant loved you.
She was very nice actually, and
okay.
So shout out to Watches of Switzerland Regent Street for being very, very nice.
Very smooth.
We're not sponsored in any way, by the way, by Watches of Switzerland. This is video number.
We're not
2.
aiming to. We're not aiming to.
This is video number 2. We're not sponsored by we're not sponsored by anyone yet. I tried on watches from many different brands. I tried on a couple of Breitlings. I tried on a couple of Omegas actually. I tried on the Seamaster, which was a great watch, but is actually quite a lot more expensive than this one.
It is, yeah, absolutely.
And this was one of the first ones I tried on, and it just felt so good on the wrist, and it looked really nice under the light. It played really well, and it sounds like a bit stupid, but the blue and red bezel I think just looks so nice. Like the Pepsi bezel, it's.
I think that when you see the blue and red, you instantly think Rolex.
Yeah, you do.
You do.
Yeah, it's impossible not to. I think.
I think if you saw that from afar across the street on someone's wrist, you'd assume it's a Rolex.
Yeah.
Which, in some ways, there are obviously kind of Rolex. There's a Rolex, Rolex DNA, I would say, in that Tudor GMT.
Yeah, for sure. It's much more of a tool watch, I would say, than a Rolex GMT. It's a bit more robust. It doesn't have quite as many sort of shiny edges. So most of the case and the whole bracelet is brushed, apart from the sides, which are polished, and then the sides of the case are polished, and it actually has a very nice little bevel on the lugs here as well.
Yeah. The finishing is great. It's finished very nicely.
For the price, I think that was part of it really. When I was trying all these different watches, I tried on a few that were £1,000 more or even £2,000 more, and it just didn't feel like you were getting that much more for the money.
I think there certainly is a level of like diminished returns to a certain degree.
Yeah.
And I think Rolex, for all of their history, and yes, they do have some amazing, beautiful watches, but I think Tudor value for money, it's the case where you pay a lot less in most instances, but you're almost getting the same amount of watch, I would say.
Yeah. Especially now that they've rolled out the in-house movements across most of the range. And that was one of the big selling points for me on this watch, was the fact that this movement has 70. Yeah, sure. There you go.
Thank you.
So it's got 70 hours of power reserve. Having a watch that you can take off the wrist, leave in your watch box for multiple days, and pick it back up and it's still running. Was a real selling point for me on this one.
So was the GMT function something you were necessarily looking for?
Not really, to be honest. Like, okay. I'm not quite like at the sort of globe-trotting travel level where a GMT function is a must-have. But it's a nice functionality to have, and I actually quite like having the additional hand on the dial. And this is going to sound a bit weird, but I also quite like the fact that you have the kind of 24-hour time pointed by the GMT hand when you're at home. And actually, since I bought it, we've basically been unable to travel anyway because of COVID. So I haven't actually got
a redundant feature on your watch.
It's been completely redundant for the past 8 months.
Have to ask, snowflake hands. Now, I'm assuming you're a fan to some extent.
Yeah, I actually like the snowflake hand. It doesn't bother me, but I know quite a few people who it offends, and I think you don't really like them, do you?
Yeah, I sit on the fence a little bit with the snowflake hands. I don't know what it is about them, but I don't know whether. I feel like the hour hand does take up a lot of space on the dial.
It does.
I don't know. Is that me just being picky?
Yeah, you are very picky.
Yeah, I'm quite picky. I do tend to go for like the same kind of watch.
Yeah, you love a clean dial.
I do like a clean, minimal dial.
A minimal dial.
6 o'clock date window.
Yeah, for me, it's not a problem, but you do have 3 snowflakes here. So you have one on the hour hand, one on the second hand, and then one on the GMT hand. So it's quite snowflake heavy, but they don't bother me if I'm being honest.
And I guess in many ways it's like a unique feature of Tudor. It's something that you would instantly recognise if you were into watches. The snowflake hands, you instantly associate with Tudor. I don't think many watches, you could say with the Omega Seamaster, the helium escape valve, that's something that's very, sort of a feature that's very much
iconic,
associated with Omega, very iconic. And I guess you could say the same for the Tudor as well, the snowflake hands.
One thing that does bother me on the dial a bit though is the date window. And I think it would just be so much better if it was at 6 o'clock. I think that it would look so much more symmetrical. The balance would be much better. I think it looks a bit awkward at that 3 o'clock.
Do you think they maybe opted to go for 3 o'clock because of the text underneath?
Yeah.
Possibly. Maybe there have been too much information at the bottom.
Potentially, yeah. Yeah, that's true. And
I've got 3 lines of text, so.
Yeah. It's on the in total you've got 5 because you've got Tudor Geneve at the top, and then the Shield logo, and then at the bottom you've got GMT, chronometer, and officially certified, which is probably I'd say on the limit for the amount of text you can have on a dial.
I mean, what else needs to be added? It's pretty much like that's all you need.
I mean, you could add the water resistance as well.
Yeah,
but
possibly.
I'm happy that they didn't, because I think otherwise that's something that I think both Rolex and Tudor occasionally do.
Yeah.
I think you were talking about the Pelagos earlier.
The Pelagos, it has like six lines of text like underneath towards the bottom of the dial.
It's got in terms of other niggles, I think the thickness is one. It's 15 mil thick, and it does. Part of that is the crystal because it is slightly domed, but it's not as domed as like on your Oris, for example. Yeah. It's probably only,
you can see a little bit.
What is that, like a couple of millimeters maybe max?
If that, yeah.
And it just has quite kind of slab sides to the case. But this one they have actually kind of beveled the under edge, which I think is unique to the GMT version. versus the kind of standard Black Bays. So that does make it wear a bit thinner, but I still think for people with smaller wrists like us, it's a bit thick. So that's
you certainly feel like you're wearing the watch when it's on. You know, it's some watches are very much under the radar when it's on the wrist. You might not realise it's on there. With this watch, there's certainly a heft to it, isn't there?
Yeah, but then I guess the flip side of that is it does feel super solid. Like
it does, yeah.
I'd not be afraid of like dropping this.
Yeah, knocking it into a door frame
around a bit.
Yeah. And ultimately, it's a tool watch, isn't it? So it's it's going to pick up scratches and scuffs, but I think they'll handle that just fine.
Yeah, and I would also say actually that I've had this for 8 months now, and it looks pretty good. Like it hasn't picked up too many scratches.
Yeah, definitely not.
And I think that's partly because of the brush finishing across most of it. But it does actually. It seems to be quite hard wearing, compared to some of my watches that have like a polished bezel, for example, where within months there's noticeable kind of scratches and scuffs that you pick up.
Yeah.
This one is doing quite well, and even though it's an aluminium bezel insert, again it looks good. So
it looks good. Yeah.
So it seems to be fairly kind of hard wearing, which is obviously a plus.
What about the faux rivets? Do they bother you?
For me, not really. And I know this is a controversial area, and I know you've got them on your Oris as well.
I have, yeah. I mean, personally, they don't bother me at all. They're not kind of sticking out. Yeah, they're not a big problem, I would say.
No. But. And I feel the same way, to be honest. Like when the watch is on the wrist and you're looking down at it, you don't even really see them. It's only when you pick it up or you're looking at the side of your wrist like that, which I don't think many people do.
Quite a weird wrist shot.
It's not really how you look at a watch. But I mean, I probably would remove them if I had to choose, but it's not a deal breaker for me.
Okay.
I think that the bigger thing I would change on the bracelet would be adding some kind of on the fly micro adjust.
Yeah, I think for, if you're paying upwards of £3,000 for a watch, that's probably something you would expect to get.
Yeah.
On a watch. I don't know, what do you think? Is that a feature that you would expect to get on a watch at around £3,000?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I would.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The other thing that on the bracelet, just to call out very quickly, is the clasp, which I think is really, really nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lovely looking clasp. And you can definitely see there's some like Rolex DNA in that, can't you? It's sort of very solid feeling. Is it machined as well?
Yeah. It's a proper machined clasp, and then then it's got some nice little ceramic ball bearings in there, so it's got a very satisfying click. And then when you kind of close the safety latch, again, it has a really, really nice.
Yeah, that's like a really reassuring
click,
isn't it? Yeah, that's definitely. And it instills confidence when you're wearing it. For sure.
And it's super smooth as well when you open it. So overall, the bracelet is great. The taper's good, nicely finished, very, very smooth. It just, if I could add micro adjust and maybe remove the rivets, then I think it would be absolutely perfect.
Would you reduce the case size a little bit, or would you stick with 41? Do you think Tudor should bring out maybe a 39, 40?
To be honest, I would love to see a 39mm GMT.
A sweet spot.
That would
sure.
That would be really nice, and I would potentially sell this to buy that.
Off it goes.
I'm sorry, but I would also say to people who have smaller wrists, I would say try this one on, because I went into the shop thinking this was going to be way too big. It was going to look that I wouldn't be able to wear it comfortably, but actually it works pretty well. Like there's no overhang.
No.
It wears much better than I think the specs would indicate. That's credit to Tudor, and I think it's partly because of the bracelet, because of the kind of beveling they've done on the case. They have managed to compensate for some of that thickness, but it is. So.
Yeah, it wears.
But it is still quite a hefty watch.
Yeah, she's a big girl.
There's no escaping that. Overall, I would thoroughly recommend this watch. It is probably the one in my collection that gets the most wrist time, and I don't really see that changing going forward. So, it's a lovely watch.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in to our video. If you like this video, please like and subscribe and comment below on your thoughts on the Tudor GMT, and we'll do our best to respond. But anyway, thank you. We've been Lug to Lug. Take care.
Bye bye.